hard because I don't ever know if it's frozen or if it's because I'm not moving. Oh, there we go. Well, glad everybody's out and you were able to make it out. Adams, Kevin, and Michelle are traveling in limbo. We're able to be back, and so it's going to have to be chaos. Kevin's going to start us off with a song, and then I'll have a short devotional and offer an invitation, and then we'll have an invitation song following that. And then Nathan Daly's here tonight, and he'll have our class for us at their Ruth. So, Kevin.
Good evening, number 502, 502. Oh, they tell me of a home far beyond the skies. Oh, they tell me of a home far away. Oh, they tell me of a home where no storm clouds rise. Oh, they tell me of an unclouded day. Oh, the land of cloudless day. Oh, the land of an unclouded sky. Oh, they tell me of a home where no storm clouds rise. Oh, they tell me of an unclouded day. Oh, they tell me of a home where my friends have gone. Oh, they tell me of that land far away, where the tree of life in eternal bloom sheds its fragrance through the unclouded day. Oh, the land of cloudless day. Oh, the land of an unclouded sky. Oh, they tell me of a home where no storm clouds rise. Oh, they tell me of an unclouded day. Oh, they tell me of the King in his beauty there, and they tell me that mine eyes shall behold, where he sits on the throne that is whiter than snow, in the city that is made of gold. Oh, the land of cloudless day. Oh, the land of an unclouded sky. Oh, they tell me of a home where no storm clouds rise. Oh, they tell me of an unclouded day. Oh, they tell me that he smiles on his children there, and his smile drives their sorrows away. And they tell me that no tears ever come again in that lovely land of unclouded day. Oh, the land of cloudless day. Oh, the land of an unclouded sky. Oh, they tell me of a home where no storm clouds rise. Oh, they tell me of an unclouded day. Song of encouragement after devotional be number 207. Number 207. Brother Matt.
2 or 3 years ago, Whitney and I and the boys, Benny and Jeb, we took a little weekend type vacation over to Atlanta. And we had 2 or 3 fun things lined up for the kids to do. This was before COVID, so we went to the mall kind of area there, and boys went to the Lego store and had a good time. But the reason we chose Atlanta was because we had consumed so much Chick-fil-A that they had given us rewards to go visit the Chick-fil-A headquarters, which is something that anyone can do, but Whitney made sure everybody there knew that we were red status members, and that just meant we had eaten a lot of Chick-fil-A that year. But it was a really neat thing. The problem was on the interstate in between Birmingham and Atlanta, which is 485, 459, one of those. Anyways, on the way over there, there was like standstill traffic. And so, of course, we got way behind schedule and missed our appointment because you have to have an appointment to go through in a tour. And you know, sometimes when you get stuck on the interstate and you never know what happened, like somebody just put on their brakes, or you never know, and you're like, man, I wonder what happened. This was not one of those days, because we saw a flaming ball of tortilla chip. There was a tortilla chip truck that had caught flames. And of course, Benny and Jeb were like, roll the windows down. Does it smell like chips? It just smelled like rubber that was burnt. But it was still like the fire department was still like, it was still smoldering like over here on the side. So we were going from 3 lanes over to 1 lane, way away from that. But at any rate, we finally made it to Chick-fil-A, and they were like, all the tours have gone. We had called, and they were like, I think Whitney said, here, you talk to them and see if you can sweet talk someone. So they felt sorry for us, and they also liked the flaming tortilla story. So they gave us a tour, and it's called a backstage tour, because you get to see how, not the sausage is made, but how the chicken's made. And they have like taste testing and all this. It was a really neat experience. And they really like dive into the history of Chick-fil-A and Truett Cathy and where Chick-fil-A got started. Because Truett Cathy is a believer and was someone who followed Christian principles, they taught that as you were in there. And the Big Three, it's what Chick-fil-A there at the headquarters called the Big Three, and I jotted these down and look over them from time to time when I find this little card in one of my Bibles. And so in the backstage tour, this is what is a founding principle of Chick-fil-A. Number 1, treat others right. And if you have any questions about these, Cooper, one of his jobs is he works at Chick-fil-A. So if you have any banking questions, he does that, and he also works at Chick-fil-A. So Chick-fil-A is also a bank, basically, because of all the money they make. So number 1, treat others right. It's really simple, but it's not always easy to do. Easy to think about, not always easy to practice. Number 2, make smart decisions. I would think they tell their employees, you already made a smart decision by working here, so while you're working here, make smart decisions. And then number 3 that's really worked out well for the Cathy family is maximize your potential. And I love this. And a little known fact about Truett Cathy and his family is over the time that he was starting Chick-fil-A and starting those businesses, he and his wife, his family, they had like basically a campus where they lived. They took in over 250 foster children. And I was like, well, that's a lot. Because John and Rebecca, my brother and sister-in-law, they have had 3 foster kids. And it was hard. It's still hard. 250. And just a lot of love. And he taught these principles to those children. And it said, like, once he was a grandfather and his kids were still helping out with this, that they didn't have to call him granddad, but the ones that did got extra money around Christmas time. So they knew to call him granddad. I like that one. But we know the golden rule, Matthew chapter 7. Treat others how you want to be treated. Do unto them as you would have them do unto you. As we begin this new year, let's slow down a little bit. And as we slow down, let's think about one more time these 3 principles. Treat others right, even when they haven't treated you right. Make smart decisions. Maximize our potential. Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11, the prophet there says, I know the plan, or God says to the prophet, I know the plans, right? The plans that God has for you, plans to prosper. And so as we think about this in the new year, how can we prosper, maximizing our potential? And following these things help out tremendously, especially by treating others right. In 2019, Chick-fil-A, their total revenue was $3.8 billion. In 2020, in a time where people didn't go out to eat a whole lot, $4.3 billion. So half $1 billion, which is, when you say half $1 billion, like that's $500 million. I'd take it, I guess. They were growing. And there's a reason they are, and that's because it was founded on some pretty good principles. So tonight, let's kind of go back to the basics and think about these things as we approach the new year. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. If you need the church in any way, if you need prayers of the church in any way tonight, won't you let us know as we stand and sing this song of encouragement.
Hark the gentle voice of Jesus fallen, tenderly upon your ear. Sweet his cry of love and pity calling. Turn and listen, stay and hear. Ye that labor and are heavy laden, lean upon your dear Lord's grace. Ye that labor and are heavy laden, come and I will give you rest. Take his yoke, for he is meek and lowly. Bear his burden, to him turn. He who calleth is the Master holy. He will teach if you will learn. Ye that labor and are heavy laden, lean upon your dear Lord's breast. Ye that labor and are heavy laden, come and I will give you rest. Then his loving tender voice obeying, bear his yoke, his burden take. Find the yoke his hand is on you laying, light and easy for his sake. Ye that labor and are heavy laden, lean upon your dear Lord's breast. Ye that labor and are heavy laden, come and I will give you rest.
Let you guys head out before I start. All right. I'm still not sure what's about to happen. So, I've been instructed to either keep it short or let it go long, whichever I prefer. So we'll see what happens. I do know that every time, 100%, I think, of the time that the preacher has gotten up when I've been there and said, this is going to be a short one, it's just an outright lie every single time. I get really itchy when I hear that. So I haven't technically said it yet, but I will promise this. I decided that I was going to talk about the Book of Ruth tonight, and we'll still do that. But I'm not going to talk about the Book of Ruth the way I planned on doing it. So it will be shorter than what I planned, but I won't. No promises beyond that. And I was thinking as I was sitting back there, it's stormy out there, but came out here for some reason. So I really thought we might have 2 to 3, and I think we had about 15 to 20. So you came out here for some reason. So we'll make sure we make it worth our time at least. I like the Book of Ruth. And it's a convenient book for me because I'm always able to find something to do with it based on whatever's going on. So since, like Matt was talking about earlier, we're kind of thinking about New Year's, thinking about that year turning again, and I was thinking, is it possible that Ruth has anything to say to that? And I think it kind of does in a way. What I'm going to try to do is run through the book, and not do the whole book like I was planning on tonight, but just kind of run through one theme of the book real quickly for you. And as we're doing that, just be kind of thinking a little bit about the types of things that you tend to think about around the turn of the year. I think it's the same for both of us. I'm not a big fan of what do they call it? Resolutions, because I'm so poor at keeping them, and I finally caught up with the fact that if I don't make them, then I don't feel bad in July. So I quit making them a few years ago. I found a list one time that I'd made of like 15 New Year's resolutions, and I didn't keep one of them. And they were really easy ones too. About half of them were just like, one afternoon of doing something, and I never got to any of it. So I don't do that, but I can't help on that New Year just kind of thinking about starting over, newness, renewal, these things that they're just right at the forefront of our thought, whether we're trying to create resolutions or not. And so we'll set that down, for a minute, and we're going to look at this theme in the book of Ruth and see how it plays out a little bit. I usually go to the other class on Wednesday nights. Do y'all talk in here, or do I do all the talking, or do you care? Of course, whatever I want to do, right? Well, just yell out whenever you feel like it. Then we'll do it that way. Okay, the book of Ruth. We'll give you just a real quick primer. Main characters in the book of Ruth. I'll ask for who are the main characters? That's all the characters almost, right? So very good. Let's see. Yeah, good. So that kind of takes us through. But yeah, we don't want to leave out Boaz. I was thinking there is one more, and God, right? So God's an interesting character in the book of Ruth. But yeah, Boaz, can't leave him out of there. All right. So the situation. How does it unfold? We have at the beginning of the book. I'll read this the first couple of verses here. During the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. A man with his wife and 2 sons went from Bethlehem of Judah to dwell in the territory of Moab. The name of that man was Elimelech. The name of his wife was Naomi. The names of his 2 sons were Mahlon, Chilion. Let's see, there were Ephratites from Bethlehem and Judah. They were Ephratites from Bethlehem and Judah, and they entered the territory of Moab and settled there. But Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died. Then she was left along with her 2 sons. They took wives, Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth, and they lived there about 10 years. But both of the sons died, and only the woman was left, without her 2 children and without her husband. And then in verse 6, as you know, she gets up and decides it's time to return to her homeland. So we have this setup in the book where this family has left Bethlehem, which is kind of ironic. Bethlehem, the word literally means house of bread. So the book starts out with this irony that there's no food in the house of bread. And so they have to leave the house of bread to go to another land to find food because there's a famine. And but she ultimately, Naomi, who we might could say is even the main character of this book, so much of the book revolves around Naomi. Naomi decides that she needs to come home. Why does she need to come home? Because as the book puts it in, let's see if I can find the verse that I just read. I think it's verse 3. When her husband dies, she was left with her 2 sons. All right? So that language, she was left. And then if you look a couple of verses later, once the sons die, only the woman, Naomi, was left without her 2 children and without her husband. So Naomi is being defined at the beginning of this book in relationship to the men in her life. So she's left without her husband, and then she's left without her husband and without her sons. And of course, the problem being in the world that they live in, what is her situation now, along with these 2 daughters-in-law that she has? She's now an outsider in the land she's been living in for 10 years. She has no support system anymore, and so she needs to go to another place to find something for herself beyond where she's ended up in Moab. And I want you to look at the language again as we read down through here. I think it's verse 12. Let's read verse 11. Naomi replied, "Turn back, my daughters. Why would you go with me?" All right, so she's saying to the 2 other women, there's no need for you to come with me. I'm not going to have any more sons. They're not going to be able to be husbands for you. I can't provide for you. Then in verse 12, "Turn back, my daughters, go. I am too old for a husband. If I were to say that I have hope, even if I had a husband tonight, and even more if I were to bear sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you refrain from having a husband? No, my daughters, this is more bitter for me than for you, since the Lord's will has come out against me." So Naomi has ended up at this place in her life where she, in her own words, is empty. She's basically lost everything. She has lost everything. And she tells these 2 daughter-in-laws that she has with her, if you stick around with me, I mean, we're going to be fighting to stay alive. And there's really no reason for that. You'll do better on your own. Here, as we well know, the most famous verse in the book, where Ruth tells Naomi in verse, verse 16, "Wherever you will go, I will go. Wherever you will stay, I will stay." So if you know nothing about Ruth, you know that verse. You've heard that one before. I'm going with you no matter what. And Naomi sees that Ruth is determined to go with her. The last verse I wanted to read to you in this chapter is right at the end, where Naomi says, after all this has happened, verse 20, "Don't call me Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty has made me very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has returned me empty." Why would you call me Naomi when the Lord has testified against me, when the Almighty has deemed me guilty? And then Naomi and Ruth go back to Bethlehem. Again, like we said at the beginning of the book of Ruth is full of word plays. It expects you to know all these puns, and we can't see them. I usually have to have somebody else point them out to me. But when Naomi says, "Don't call me Naomi," Naomi is a Hebrew word that means pleasant. And she says, "Call me Mara." Mara is a Hebrew word that means bitter. So what she's saying in verse 20, don't call me by my name, don't call me Naomi, don't call me pleasant, call me bitter. For the Almighty has made me very Mara. The Almighty has made me very bitter. Mm-hmm. Right.
If that's a reference to how long they were married, that in those times that was a long time for them to be married and not have children.
Right.
And it doesn't really say, it said they dwelt there. That's probably the whole time they dwelt.
That's what I think it is. That's what I've always thought it was. And
Actually, verse 4, at the beginning of the sentence, it says, and they took his wives of the women of Moab, and then it goes to names, and then it says, and they dwell thereabout.
right, so
Sequence, it looks like they got married, and then they
it's hard to say. I mean, the way that these narratives work in Hebrew, we don't see it in English, but they use the word "and" between every phrase. So they use the word "and" everywhere. We don't do that in English. And and this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and it's usually in consecutive order like that, unless there's some kind of syntactical break, which I don't know. I would have to go look to see if that's there. But the big issue typically is that they're in order. So if we were to read it that way, Elimelech dies. She is left with 2 sons. They took wives. So it looks, I mean, generally speaking, I'm not going to bet the farm on this one, but generally speaking, her husband dies after they have had sons, and then the sons are married. And then they take wives for themselves. Here are their names, and they live there for about 10 years. Now, who does the "they" refer to? Does it refer back to the entire group, meaning the 10 years, or does it refer to just the children who have recently got married? Well, I can't answer that from this here. Right. And to me, it would make more sense for it to be the capstone statement for the whole unit there, because you've got a period of time. I mean, we don't know how Elimelech died, but a period of time has passed where I'm assuming he's somewhat healthy. I mean, I don't know, maybe he was so hungry he was about to die when he left Bethlehem. I don't know. But I would assume he was healthy enough to leave, and some time passes, and they get married sometime in that 10 years, but I don't know the answer to that for sure. Of course, the important thing theologically that we're trying to, find in here is what's happening to Naomi. And what's happening to Naomi is she's losing her family one by one. And it's interesting that we have this discussion about what's the 10 years apply to, because what's really important there is look at all that happened in that verse. 3 people died. I mean, probably didn't all die on the same day, right? But 3 people died over that span of years, and now she thought she was in dire straits when she needed to leave Bethlehem. But guess what? She was doing pretty good when she was hungry from famine. Now she's in dire straits. Now she has nothing. She knows it, and she tells these daughters that. And so in verse 20, she says, "Call me bitter now, because that's all I am." And look at her language here in 21. "I went away full, but the Lord has returned me empty." And that's that language I wanted you to grab onto tonight as we're kind of thinking about this new year change. She says, "I went away full." I mean, isn't that funny? Ironic? Funny, not haha, but funny, weird. I went away full. She wasn't full. It was the middle of a famine. She was so hungry, she had to leave her country. But reflecting back on it, she can say, in the middle of that famine, when I had no food, I was full. Now I'm empty. And so look at what's happened to Naomi over this span of time, to where she's left with nothing. And then you've got Ruth, who says, "I don't care. I'm with you. Wherever. We're going to be together." Now we're going to skip over the rest of the book. We'll come back to it another time. I like Ruth a lot, so we'll get time to talk about that another night. But one of the things that immediately happens in the next chapter is Naomi spots a redeemer. And a redeemer in the book of Ruth is different things. A redeemer can be someone that just helps you out. We've got plenty of Bible verses we could look at and say that. A redeemer also can be something real specific that helps you out in a very specific way by buying your land back for you, to keep it short. Naomi has returned home, but she's been gone a long time. Her land is gone, someone else owns it. She has nothing. She's really just wandering and homeless when she returns here. But she spots this guy, and she tells Ruth, this guy's our Redeemer. Now, she doesn't tell us as readers what kind of Redeemer Boaz is. She might just see him as someone that's going to help him out. She might see him as something more. We don't know that until we get further in the story. We're not going to worry too much about that tonight. But what we need to worry about tonight as we're reading through this is that Naomi, from pretty much the beginning of the book, has come home and said, Ruth, me and you we need something. We're in need of redemption. And that becomes the plot of the book. So we have these intertwining themes through the rest of the book, love and redemption, that if you decide to read this book sometime this week, look for those. Look for the word redemption. It comes up like 23 times, I think, in 4 chapters. Love. How do each of the characters show love for each other? You know, how does Boaz show love for Naomi and Ruth? How does Ruth show love for Naomi, or Naomi for Ruth, or however it goes? And as we read through this book, we're constantly looking for what kind of redemption is going to take place that's going to solve the problem of the book, right? And we get a few answers, but we get one that's very specific, and it's kind of tricky. It comes at the end of the book. In chapter 4, we've been introduced to Ruth extensively in chapter 2, and then we've been introduced to Boaz pretty extensively in chapter 2 and 3, and we have these expectations. But then, as we get to the end of the book, we remember it's Naomi that's been the center of the story, and Naomi needs something. What does Naomi need in the book of Ruth? More than anything, what does Naomi need? A what? Yeah, right. She needs an heir. Why would an heir be important to Naomi? Right, yeah. She wants her family to carry on. She doesn't want this to be the end of everything. And so the whole book, we've been looking for this Redeemer. And who's the Redeemer in the book of Ruth? In a sense, it's Boaz, right? But Boaz is not the only Redeemer in the book. How about that? Look at the end of the book. Boaz certainly he does that. He redeems the land for Ruth and marries her. But in chapter 4, Ruth, let's look at 14. The women said to Naomi, "May the Lord be blessed, who today hasn't left you without a redeemer." There it is. You have a redeemer. "May his name be proclaimed in all of Israel. He will restore your life and sustain you in your old age. Your daughter-in-law who loves you has done what? Given birth to him." Has given birth to your redeemer. And so this is better than even 7 sons. So Naomi took the child and held him to her breast, and she became his guardian. They gave him a name. A son has been born to Naomi. They called his name Obed. Obed in Hebrew means servant, which is really interesting because one thing we know about the book of Ruth, when we have this little genealogy at the end that gives all these names, and it ends up with who? Who does it lead up to? David? Yeah, David, who is that servant king of God. And here we have a baby servant is born, baby Obed. And so he's referred to as Naomi's redeemer because it is him. He is the one who, as he grows up, will inherit this land that used to be in Naomi's family, and he will hold it. All Naomi needed to get her land back was an heir. But how on earth would she do that? She was old. Her daughter-in-law was a widow. She had no other sons. And Obed comes along here at the end of the story, given specifically by God. This is explicitly that God provides Obed to this family so that Naomi can have redemption. And one of the interesting lines here, again, it's another one of those word plays with the beginning of the book. This baby will restore life. He will renew your life. Which if we go back to the beginning of the book, let me see. Yeah, it was that verse we read, 121. The Lord has returned me empty. I have returned to Bethlehem empty. And now we use the same word here at the end of the book. God has returned you to life. So we have the complete change of Naomi. One way from fullness to emptiness in chapter 1, and as the story progresses, she's changed back again from emptiness now to fullness. And so what we want to think about as we think about a book like this at the time of New Year is to say this plight of fullness to emptiness, or emptiness to fullness, that we're all on, these circles we go in all the time. I mean, how many times do we feel like we're empty without hope? How often do those cycles come around for us and we just can't get a handle on life? How many times does it literally happen where everything's taken away from us, or something incredibly important is taken away from us? It just leaves us hurting, leaves us empty. And as we're kind of clicking over into a new year, one of the things that we're all thinking about, we can't help it, we're like, I want this one to be better than the last one. I want this one to be better than the last three. What's going to provide us fullness? What's going to fill us up? What fills up Naomi in this book? Well, literally a baby. But I think we can go a little broader than that. And we can say, God shows up for Naomi. And when does God show up? Well, God shows up in community. She bumps into Boaz, someone she hasn't seen in a long time, but she knows there's a connection there, a communal connection to Boaz. Ruth sticks with her. Again, this communal connection. I mean, Ruth's not family. Not really. She could have stayed home with her real family. But there's a communal connection that holds her together and brings fullness. And as we kind of punch into a new year here, let's think about where that lies. Maybe with this 20 people we got here tonight, I'm doing preacher count. 12 people we got here tonight, right? That hold us together. That we come in here 3-4 times a week usually. And this is a group that holds us together and brings something into us that we would be missing otherwise. There's no reason to get out in the rain, right? It's only because we feel like there's something drawing us together in this. And that's something of what Naomi has that brings fullness back to her. Oh, man. Yeah, I did it too. It's 10 after 7 already. So I didn't go long, but I went too long. So I've got a lot more on Ruth. We'll talk about Ruth more in the future. It's a great book. It's a lot of fun. Why don't I lead us in a prayer, and then we can call this to an end. Okay. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for all the gifts that you give, but tonight we want to thank you for being a God who cares enough to bring us back, to be the one who provides that new thing, that needed thing when we are at our worst, when we are running on empty, when we don't know where to turn. We thank you for this story of Ruth and Naomi, and being able to read through their example of how they stuck together as family and had your name on their lips constantly, so that when that baby came, they knew that it was a sign from you. And we ask you to continue to watch over us and stay near us as we look for those signs of hope in this world, and as we try to tell all the others that we come in contact with that you are the one, that you are the way, and that you are the one that will provide newness to each one of us. Thank you so much for your son, for being the true servant, for being the one that could come and show us what service is, what being a servant is, and help us to follow in his footsteps as best we can as we look to you for help. And it's in Christ's name we pray. Amen.